Hello and welcome to India's World. The India-China relationship is one of partnership as well as rivalry. Partnership in a growing trade relationship and rivalry as China increases its influence in the region and uses Pakistan to checkmate India. Last week, Foreign Secretary S. Jaishankar visited Beijing for the first Sino-Indian strategic dialogue since Prime Minister Modi took over. The dialogue came in the wake of China vetoing for the third time the designation of Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar as a terrorist by the United Nations. China has also blocked India's entry into the nuclear suppliers group. It has also ignored Indian objections to the proposed China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC) passing through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which India claims as its sovereign territory. India and China have been strategic partners since 2005. But what does this strategic partnership mean and what drives it? Competition, cooperation, or both? How does the relationship between the two shape South Asia's strategic future? To discuss this, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador M.K. Bhadrakumar. He was India's ambassador to Uzbekistan and Turkey, one of our foremost strategic thinkers and commentators. He writes widely and his column, foreign policy blog, Indian Punchline, is extremely popular. We have with us Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, another strategic analyst. He's a visiting professor at the Administrative Staff College, Hyderabad, and was earlier the chairman of Center for Policy Alternatives and a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. We are also lucky to have with us Dr. Jabin. He is Assistant Director and Fellow of the Institute of Chinese Studies in New Delhi. I welcome all of you to this discussion. Mr. Bhadrakumar, what does the strategic relationship between India and China look like today? And what are the areas of strategic competition as well as outright hostility between the two countries?
Let me tell you, first of all, in the context of the this happening, the strategic dialogue, we are not looking for anything productive there. You know, strategic dialogue is a kind of an interaction of a different kind altogether. It serves a useful purpose. Now, this strategic dialogue forum is important now. That itself shows what is the level to which the relationship has graduated. Number one, to my understanding, the bilateral dimension to the relationship. There, in my judgment, it's not so much the resolution of the border problem. I think it's a management of the border problem is what is under consideration there. What is possible there, realistically possible for a conceivable future. But I think the stress is on the economic side. Jaishankar's talks also, I think there was a much emphasis on that part of it. Number two, both countries are emerging powers. You know, there is a big difference between India and China, but all the same, there is a certain commonality of interest, shared concerns, not only in the economic sphere, but in other areas also. In a bigger sense, in terms of the democratization of the world order, Jaishankar's briefing particularly emphasized BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Afghanistan. These are three areas he singled out, and he said that were very useful discussions on international issues, but he singled out three areas. Yeah. Now you see that itself shows the kind of range of concerns that have developed there. Then finally, you know, you have to reckon with this, that we are both Asian powers, and there is a security paradigm involved here. And how do we tackle this? How do we move forward? You used an expression in your beginning, rivalry, and then you tempered it as competition. My understanding is that, you know, that the effort is to see that the competitive spirit doesn't degenerate into rivalry.
Okay. Mohan, are there any areas of strategic convergence besides the ones that Bhadran has mentioned between India and China?
This term strategic partnership is the most abused one in India. We have about 28 strategic partnerships, you know, including, you know, United Arab Emirates and so
South Africa.
Yeah, South Africa. So
Tanzania.
Whatever, Tanzania. So it's become a bit of a joke in the lack of ideas. You call it a strategic partnership. But we have a strategic relationship with China, which is important because, you know, it's our largest neighbor. It's also the world's largest economy, and we have an ongoing military security dispute with them. So it's a very important relationship to us. So this business of having these representatives meet regularly, periodically, exchange of visits by presidents, prime ministers, etc., is very good. It's institutionalized. But this underneath all this, which is driving our relationship, is two critical factors. Pew Research has shown time and again that the countries the Chinese dislike the most, people, not the state. Japanese they dislike most, and Indians are next. So I always theorize that whatever you do, this relationship cannot go past with what the people think. And China, is not a monolithic state-controlled state as we think it is, or many like to believe. There's a lot of free exchange of views. Social media is taken care of.
Equally, the relationship is not being driven by the Chinese people. It's being driven by the Chinese government.
It is influenced by the Chinese people. The Chinese government cannot be oblivious anymore to the wishes of the people.
Did Pew Research also say why they hate Indians?
No, this is just like they don't like characteristics of they say that they're too noisy, they're dirty, they're aggressive, and so there are all kinds of factors. But culturally, you don't like, or you don't like, it's a part of your nature.
Okay.
You don't like.
But my question to you
was,
are there areas of strategic convergence between the two countries?
There are few areas of strategic convergence that both of us at this moment are hugely invested in world order as it is. It serves us both well. This system which has worked so well for the Chinese is beginning to work well for us. This Washington consensus. So we are more invested in it, the Chinese and Indians, than the Americans themselves. The Americans, for them, it has been at their cost, they think. So, we'd like to keep this stability going, so there's nothing which breaks this, trade wars and, conventional wars, all these things are totally avoided. So we're invested in that piece. So to that extent, and we're also interested in changing the world economic order slowly and systematically from this predominant this thing of the dollar and our reliance on the dollar.
Okay. Jabin, some people say that just before this strategic dialogue, India tried to introduce Taiwan into the India-China relationship, play the Taiwan card, as it were. And was that why India welcomed a delegation of women parliamentarians from Taiwan just before the strategic dialogue? Or do you think that's reading too much into it?
I think that's reading too much into it. I mean, India is not alone in developing relations with Taiwan. We've had a lot of exchanges with the Taiwanese over the years. And, primarily these are economic focused. I think what we should concentrate, in the India-China setup is not just communication, but also the quality of communication. As Mr. Guruswamy pointed out, I think it is a strategic issue, the fact that ordinary people on both sides do not hold each other or do not understand each other very well. Because you see, the Chinese have taken to this line that, our public opinion does not allow us to, resolve the boundary issue in a way that, it's the Indians are pushing for. That our public opinion says this, our public opinion says that. So I think we need to be aware of these trends and these dynamics within the Chinese system. And it's also not enough. High-level visits, however long duration they might be of, are not sufficient. We need to develop a culture of regular interactions, of officers, officials from both sides meeting regularly over the years. So that's how you build up a partnership. I mean, look at the US-China relationship. They have hundreds of dialogues. And how many dialogues do we have between the Indians and the Chinese?
Okay, point well taken. We'll continue with this discussion in a bit, but we need to take a break. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing the recently concluded Sino-Indian strategic dialogue. Ambassador Bhadrakumar, India blames China for blocking its entry into the NSG. But China says that we are not the only country that's blocking you. There are other countries, Brazil, Austria, New Zealand, Ireland, Turkey. They're all opposed to India's membership of NSG. Now, my question to you is, are the Chinese objection to India's membership, primarily saying that you've not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, is the Chinese objection different from that of these other countries?
You see, I think Chinese position has merits. We have it's been wrong on our part to have taken this as a kind of negative attitude toward India. NSG has a history. It was conceived by the Americans. Americans have rewritten the rules of it. Americans have made a special dispensation for Pakistan. Now, other countries, and China, when it joined the NSG, was one type of country, and now it is a different kind of country, and it has a different kind of attitude towards nuclear security and non-proliferation issues and so on. So it says that, that in principle, there is no objection to it, but then let it be on the basis of certain principles. So we need to discuss this about what is this NSG about in the world of tomorrow. And without that, we can't do it in a haphazard way. I think there is merit in this. Okay. And of course, in this, Pakistan is involved in it. But do not forget that Israel is also involved in it. Yeah. And there are other countries involved in it. So it is not generally, it is not a question of, India versus China. Okay. This is how I see it.
Jabin, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I would differ slightly in that, see, the Chinese insistence on principles is, is not a consistent insistence. India must certainly do its homework with the other nations in the NSG in trying to convince them on the grounds that they are concerned about. For the Chinese, this is a political issue. And if it's a political issue, then we need to be resolving the matter on political grounds.
So you're saying for Chinese, it's a political issue. Of course. For the other countries, it's a non-proliferation NPT issue.
It could be that. So I would say that if India has to, look, we are now becoming a member of the SCO, which is also something that the Chinese have agreed to. So I think one must, Ambassador Bhadrakumar is right in saying that we shouldn't paint this as an India versus China issue. I think we have done that a bit too much. But we should also not let the Chinese get away with this insistence on principles.
Mohan, so what did the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang mean by saying that frictions between China and India are not bilateral but multilateral? Was he referring to the issue of NSG membership, or was he referring also to the Chinese veto on Masood Azhar?
Both. But he's giving himself a position on which Chinese foreign policy depends, And that could be valid, perfectly valid. Because,
but how is it valid in the case of Masood Azhar?
No. Point is that we have invested so hugely in this NSG membership. There's no practical benefit, little practical benefits to us.
Because we already have a dispensation which allows us to
and export. We are in the MTCR, which is more important for us. So, we just made it a big issue. I don't think our diplomats have really understood or using it as a pressure point to put.
No, I understand that. But are the issues between China and India multilateral and not bilateral, as the Chinese spokesperson is saying?
Obviously, it's multilateral, because if the Chinese are saying that there is a rule of being a member of the NPT before you can get in, and other countries are there also, like you mentioned, even small fellows like Finland are objecting to our membership on that, saying that they've not signed the NPT. So, it is something which has to be addressed. Now, if you can take care of China, you still got the others to deal with. You still won't be a member of the NSG. So, so therefore, I think one has to look at it a little more and not invest so much on this membership. Masood Azhar is a different kettle of fish. Masood Azhar, there's enough evidence that he's been a terrorist. He was in Indian jail, he was sentenced and all that. And that, I think, the Chinese need to be convinced. The Chinese have also turned this game into series of pressure points. They'll give in to you after extracting something to you in return. They're indulging in trades. So I think, we should keep using it, and we should apply counter pressures. Point is that we don't apply any counter pressures. We've got the other issues there, and then we play these little games with Taiwan, and then we get the Uyghurs in, and then deny them visa on the last day. So, we are either play it full, let the Uyghurs come, let them have a conference here, then the Chinese will behave differently with you.
Yeah, but some came and some were denied visa, but leave that aside. On Masood Azhar, Ambassador Bhadrakumar, China says it requires more evidence. Now, what more evidence does China require when 4 out of 5 UN Security Council members are saying that this guy is a terrorist? That's why they had to bring in the veto. If the majority was on their side, they would not need the veto. And when Masood Azhar's organization, Jaish-e-Mohammed, is on the banned list of the United Nations already. So the organization is on the banned list. The head of the organization, you refuse to put him on the banned list, saying that give us evidence. So what sense does it make?
Let me approach this subject laterally from another side. It's very important. 15 years ago, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar was put on this watch list at the behest of the Americans. 15 years later, they've done their damnness to persuade Russia to agree to remove him from the list. Russia finally took 8 months, and Russia finally agreed. Now why? Because he is going to contest in the next presidential election to become the president of Afghanistan. And you can't become the president of Afghanistan without a green signal from the Americans. We know that. So this is the whole history. So let's look at it. In the past also, we have had people blacklisted there. I think we should be, these are issues where we should be realistic. Is it worth it? Is it worth it doing it like this and then splitting hair like this? Is it worth it? And my feeling is, a final point is this, I think we are going to cross the hump. Because from what I understand, reading between the lines of Jayashankar's remarks, he has said that now other countries means 3, according to Indian press reports, 3 permanent members of the Security Council have now come up front on this issue. I think it is about time for India to lead this superpower and 2 other powers from the rear and delist it as an India-China issue. Because from the Chinese perspective, whatever their foreign ministry spokesman has said that there are only multilateral problems, this is not a multilateral problem. This is geopolitical also, because it concerns, we are making a demand on their relationship with Pakistan.
Okay, so we're going to discuss that in a bit.
It's a red line.
We're going to discuss that in a bit. We need to take a break at this point. We need to take a break at this point. I'll come back to this point again. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the recently concluded Sino-Indian strategic dialogue, and before we went on the break, we were discussing China, Pakistan, and Pakistan's role really with in the Sino-Indian relationship and the positions that the 2 countries take. So do you think, Jabin, that as long as China is pursuing close and enhanced economic and strategic ties with Pakistan, it will continue to block India's requests to please Pakistan, whether it is to blacklist Masood Azhar, NSG membership, or Indian objections to CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor?
See, I think we have to look at the China-Pakistan relationship from a much broader perspective. The Chinese are taking an enormous risk by moving from a very comfortable military and political elite-based relationship to something much more complicated in this China-Pakistan economic corridor, economic relationship. And I think that's an opportunity for us. I mean, you know, on Masood Azhar, I think in a way there is an argument to be made for pushing it, because if China wants to take a global leadership role, then its position on terrorism must be clarified. And you know, it cannot take a double standard position here. So I think it's useful for us to push it. And I think it is also helps the Chinese to come down to a position where they will have to take other countries, including India, along on this position. Now, on the question of CPEC, I mean, our argument is sovereignty. But I think, you know, in 70 years, if we've not managed to achieve much by way of regaining sovereignty over Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, then it's time to think out of the box.
Yeah, but China did not consult India on CPEC. If it was a cooperative venture, they would have taken us into confidence. It was a strategic
look, why should China consult India? I mean,
because it passes through a disputed territory. It's an area claimed by India.
Yeah, that's true. But you see, other countries do not consult with China when we talk about disputes with the Chinese, right? I mean, I think this is geopolitics. I mean, let's be realistic about it. We should make a point, we should make an official point, that's one thing. But let's also be practical and see what can we gain out of it. So I think, you know, where will the Chinese and the Pakistanis do business with? It's going to be the Indian market. So I think Pakistani businessmen are under no illusion, the Chinese are under no illusion that CPEC can take off on its own without connecting with India. And that's an opportunity we should exploit.
All right.
It's an opportunity for us to get back into the game in Pakistan.
Okay. We probably need a separate discussion on that. But right now, on the strategic dialogue, Mohan, how much of a problem is trade between the 2 countries? Because the deficit has risen. Indian exports have fallen by almost 16% between 2015 and 2016. And India is asking for China to open up its IT sector and agricultural products market so that, you know, this deficit can become over. Do you think that is going to happen?
I think this is our biggest problem with China, and which we need to attend to with urgency. The annual deficit over $50 or $60 billion is rising, is unsustainable. We cannot sustain it. And, you know, we need to take hard positions to benefit our economy. And the Chinese have not really invested in India, though markets are open. Now we have opened up even many infrastructure areas, including ports, for investment. So there's talk without real investment. And we've got to we need investments. We've got to coax them into investment, or say that this free access to the market may not be available to you anymore. And we haven't done that because, you know, we don't have a position on how to deal with infringements of WTO, dumping and all these things. And it takes far too long. Steel has been dumped by China for the last 4 years, 5 years. And we're only waking up to it now. So we need a full-fledged, empowered China study section in the MEA or the Commerce Ministry people also, and act immediately. And I think we need to push the Chinese on this. And the Chinese are definitely dumping goods because their interest rates are different, and some of the prices you see.
Forget dumping issues for the moment. I'm saying that what are the goods that India, besides sending iron ore or minerals to China, has China opened up its market to Indian goods? Are Indian goods competitive?
Whenever I go to China, I meet people from certain Indian sectors who are already in China, and they do complain that there are restrictions on investment, and like on IT, we're not allowed to bid for many contracts, including the Beijing University doesn't allow us Indian companies to bid for any of their work. But there are other issues also involved. China has the same impediments to investment as we do. It's a little guangxi and a little bit of money being distributed around, which some of our companies find difficult to do out there. But you can't complain over that. But you got to offer competitive advantage. For instance, why can't we link up the volume of the trade deficits with their investment, saying that you can't continue like this.
All right. Now, last question really. How do you see the competition between India and China shaping up in South Asia, particularly in terms of investment and infrastructure projects, etc.? Do you think we've already lost that game, or are we still in the game?
Economic side, I really don't think that that we are to compare ourselves in terms of a challenger to the Chinese presence. I think it is way ahead of India's performance, whether it is ASEAN, whether it is Asia as a whole, whether it is globally. But the point in all this is this, that ultimately we must look at the big picture. There is also something to be said about the trajectory of the Indian foreign policy through the last 2 to 3 year period. And undoubtedly, any observer could notice that there has been a certain hardening of the Chinese stance. So we are here now. Most of the discussion, we counted the trees, but not the woods, as to whether do we have a strategy. How do we?
We had a strategy. We had the Prime Minister sort of taking Mr. Xi Jinping on a swing in Sabarmati, visiting his hometown in China.
But that was not the strategy. In Ahmedabad, on the Sabarmati banks, we saw one strategy, and we saw a different strategy being played out on the television screens in Delhi. So what is the strategy? What is the real strategy, and what is the surreal strategy?
You tell me.
I am confused. I think, Jashankas, the upshot of this strategic dialogue is that international environment has changed, and many fundamental assumptions of Indian foreign policy through the last 3 year period, there has been a certain gravitation towards the pivot strategy and so on. Many of these assumptions are not going to be relevant in the coming 4 year period at least.
Okay, just one sentence. We run out of time, so just one sentence.
I think this is a continuing thread of turning in Indian foreign policy, trying to turn us into a frontline state. There's huge lobby invested in that, and we've got to be cautious about that also.
Okay.
I think the strategic dialogue must include some forward-looking areas of interest. Economy, artificial intelligence, cyber issues. Those are issues that India and China will have to set the rules together on.
Okay, so we need to close now because we've really run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you, Dr. Jabin Jacob, Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, Ambassador M.K. Bhadrakumar. Thank you for participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again as usual next week. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.